Okay, so I'd like to invite on stage all the Q&A speakers. Let me open up the list. I'm gonna use our awesome app. I'm hoping it's not gonna crash. Okay, hang on. All right, so the first panelist was Talcol from Wix. Come up stage. The next speaker is Eric Vicenti from Facebook. The next one is Andrzej Stals, open source hacker. And the last one is Ville from Reindex, our sponsor. Okay, here's one microphone. Can I get a second one? Pavlak, you have the one? Okay. All right. So does anyone have a question already that would like to ask? No? It's good because I prepared some stuff. Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for this amazing conference. We were having a great time, so thank you very much. I would like to know if you have done or developed any application with offline content, and you have to deal with migration between your saved data and the new data structure. Because this is something we are experiencing a lot with a lot of customers we have, that they want like their own company applications, but they want to save all the information offline to be able to consume it without connection. But you know, then 2 weeks later they want to change add some structure or change it. So there's quite a problem if you have to migrate, and I would like to know if you have like any suggestion or something like that.
I'll start. A funny story. We have an app with a few million users, and one of our huge mess ups that we had was migration issues. And we had one version where we changed the schema of how the session is saved in the app, and we did not handle the migrations correctly. And the result of that was that about all the users who upgraded the app got about 95% of them got signed out, which is not that bad, but not great. And 5% got into a boot loop that you could only get out of if you updated the app from the App Store, which was insane. Okay, even if you killed the process, it didn't help. This was the first and only time we've sent an email of apology to all of our users. So these are words of caution, especially when coming from the web. It is people don't take migration seriously, and you always assume that your users are running on the latest version. And migrations are difficult because you need to assume that users are running multiple versions of the app, and then you have to migrate from multiple versions of the schema. And this is very, very difficult. There are tactics to do that. Usually you can read about them in the native space. I think the standard tactic is to have a migration file from one version to the next, and you keep all of those files in your project, and then when your app starts up and you know which version of the schema, you just run them one by one. So this is what I would suggest, and if you don't have to do it, don't do it. I mean, it's super dangerous, and we suffered from it.
Well, I have something to say because I find this a very convenient question, because the decentralized social network that I'm helping to build, which currently has 0 users on mobile, but we have a couple of hundreds of users on desktop. And it's a serious thing because our app is basically not just on offline first or offline sometimes, but it's basically offline, in the sense that we're building this for communities that suddenly run out of internet. Let's say the government censors it. So it's totally offline, and then you need to figure out how to sync that with other peers, and the internet is one option. So what I can share is that the data structure, the database there is actually just a log. And there's people who talk a lot about this, like Substack and Dominic Tarr and Macintosh. They built like Hyperlog and SSB and LevelDB. And with the idea of a log, you don't need to delete data, it's immutable, and then you can figure out how to interpret the new schemas for new messages. So that's one approach. I don't know if it works for like a typical app that you're building, but anyway, it's good to sort of think of these different types of databases. It doesn't need to be relational and mutable and deletable. So if you have something immutable in a log, maybe you can do more. So there's a lot of talks about logs.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. To me, I'm reminded of a similar problem where we have when we go and we sort of deploy a new version of our app, and do we deploy a new version of the API at the same time? How do we deal with the fact that there are several different installed versions of our APIs, but we only want to maintain one server? So we've got GraphQL to solve that problem. And one of the things that we've been experimenting with at Facebook is actually using GraphQL client fields for this exact case, where basically we'll have additional GraphQL types that are defined in Relay only on the client. And then we can go ahead and store those fields. And if we use the same policy that we usually use with GraphQL on the server, where we only ever add fields, we never change and break the schema, which we can never do because we can never break old clients, then we're going to always keep ourselves in a somewhat safe state, even though we sometimes have stale fields lying around that we no longer care about.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, I can see we got two more questions. One here, and I saw you. Raise the hand. You will have to ask this. Okay, but I still know where you're sitting. So,
all right. So my question is kind of two-part. First of all, what do you see as the biggest challenges and problems with React Native and its kind of ecosystem today? And then, like, how do you see it going forward in the next few years? Like, what's the path forward to make it better for everyone?
Oh, gosh, I guess I'm already holding the mic on this one. That's an exciting question. There's a lot going on. One of the most exciting things that I'm excited about is getting to achieve really, really smooth interactions. And I know Tal's been working on that with React Native Interactable, which I'm very excited about. And as far as the sort of broader things with the community goes, I'm personally very excited about decoupling some of the projects that are really, really massive and difficult to maintain. And React Native is one of those, where ideally it wouldn't be such a monolithic project, and we would have tools that are a little bit more isolated within them. And we're starting to see some of these developments coming out with the decoupling of React Native Packager with Metro. And hopefully in the next couple of years, or in the next couple of months, or we're still trying to figure out the game plan for it, but it'd be really great if we could decouple some of our components, like the platform support, so that we can have better support for first-class platforms like Windows without having to sort of use the hacks that we have in place today. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about.
One of the challenges that I want to see the community overcoming in the next, year or so is involving more native developers in the ecosystem. But I think if you see the numbers and you see the number of contributors and contributions made to all the projects in the community in the React Native space, you will see that the vast majority are JavaScript contributions. And I'm talking mostly about people coming to other repos that they did not start and adding code. And we need to fix that. We need to have equal contributions with native developers as well, and this is not easy. I know for me personally, if I were trying to add native code to React Native itself, I found that very, very intimidating and difficult. Just because the code base is huge, it's very hard to understand what goes on in there, and most importantly, if you contribute something, you don't know if you broke it. So I think testing would be a material thing of that, and for that, because the most complex repos have code that is both JavaScript and native iOS and native Android, we would have to have complex testing solutions that can test all of that end to end. And we know how to do unit tests very well, but without seeing the entire system working together, it is useless. And we are working on projects. I know that Facebook has internal projects that are hard to open source that do these things internally, but we need these tools in the open source community. So we've been working on Detox that tries to resolve that, and I hope to see more repos implement those things and allow external contributors to see that how everything is working and to see that they didn't break anything.
One development that I'm interested in the future is bringing mobile React Native for mobile applications and web applications closer to each other. And we've already seen very interesting developments like React Primitives and React Native for web, which go in this direction. So, and I'm sure there's going to be more development in that area in the future. And also things like WebAssembly are interesting because they will give web applications similar capabilities that we have on mobile applications with native modules.
I'd also like to comment something about basically agreeing with Eric and continuing that it would be really useful if React Native could be more modular. And this is starting to happen. For instance, I guess prop types was now made separate, and it's good if this trend continues. I've been working with people in the Node community where everything is very modular and it's really easy to build your own stuff. And I noticed when I was helping bring Elm with React Native that it's a bit complicated to fit those things together when you have a monolith, and it would be much nicer if we'd had just the bridge and sort of a nicely documented way of using just the bridge, and then all these other languages like Elm and Reason, they're starting to appear with React Native. It would be interesting to define what is actually React Native's identity in terms of what is the thing, or is it just an ecosystem of various things? Those things interest me a lot, and I see a small direction happening already, let's say, at least with Reason, right?
All right. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, I can see there is. Huh? Here. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, so probably this topic should be forbidden there, but I need to ask that. Have you ever considered using Xamarin instead of React Native? And if you did, maybe you can compare it to these two solutions. What is best for you and why you prefer React Native?
Well, one of the reasons I prefer React Native is because React and Relay. These are really nice ways to declaratively describe our interfaces and our data needs. And we would have to re-implement that entirely in Xamarin, plus re-implement a big ecosystem of stuff. But if we're talking about competing technologies, I'm far more excited about Flutter than Xamarin. So that's just the personal thing.
I haven't used Xamarin, but I was almost assigned to a project where I was going to use Xamarin. And what I've discovered a little bit from the research that we did is that it's not learn once, run everywhere. So you don't have exactly the same paradigm that React has. You're actually running, you're writing C# for Android with all of the Android APIs and ways of working, and then you're writing C# for iOS and their ways of working. So there's at least that difference. But Xamarin is still a very mature and good tool, I think, for doing that sort of cross-platform.
I haven't used Xamarin in production either, and we did similar research, and I agree, because when you write platform-specific code in a different language, and you go to Stack Overflow to see how you solve a certain problem, and then you can't just copy-paste the code. You need to translate it to C#, and that will be difficult. So I think the paradigm is different, but I do very much love the direction of writing in one language and compiling it to different platforms. I think it is very promising, and we might see things like beyond React Native evolving in this way. For example, I would take maybe in the future, far future, a language like Reason that is statically typed, and maybe compile that to native LLVM to run on native devices, and compile that to JavaScript to run on browsers. And I think this is a very interesting direction, which Xamarin really paved the way in production for.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Eric, so maybe you want to tell us your comparison between React Native and Flutter, because you mentioned that you checked that one out.
Yeah, I got myself in trouble now. Flutter's still really young. I haven't played with it too much. I'm not sure I'm the best one to really compare it, but I think it's very exciting that that Google is also chasing in the same area as we are. It shows us that I think we're doing at least something right, and we still also have a lot to learn from what Flutter is doing. Right? They have really beautiful implementations of components. They have really beautiful, amazing documentation. Like, I was on the open source team when, some of the Flutter documentation was updated, and we were like sending the links around, like, "Whoa, guys, look at this! This is inspirational work in that regard." So, I think it's good for us to have a little bit of competition in the community, and for us to keep our ears open and our eyes open. So.
All right. Okay, we got next question.
So my question is how to handle all the dependencies coming from React Native. So as a C++ developer, for example, everyone hates and loves Boost. So you want not to use it because of its problems, dependencies, and everything coming from this, but you need to use it because it's great. So in production, you have to care about all your dependencies.
For me, I don't know actually. I mean, I'm not here on panel, guys, so don't look at me. No, but seriously, I think that I'll be happy to answer this like after the panel, because I probably have to think about it for a while and look into the code that we got. In general, I'm not gonna lie, like as far as dependencies, like I find myself in trouble quite a lot of times. But my kind of Objective-C background comes in handy as far as, like, for example, handling iOS native stuff, and so that helps me a lot. But I see a lot of developers struggling with controlling the native dependencies on a daily basis, because there's just too many platforms to take care of at a time. But there are a lot of initiatives to kind of work around this, and one of them is the thing that we were thinking about with Eric and other people in the community, which is once you eject the React Native app from Create React Native App, we were thinking about adding like a set of commands that operate on some sort of JSON information and allow you to kind of control native stuff a bit more than just React Native link, this kind of thing. So that's what happens in that area, but. Specifically to the dependency that you mentioned, after the panel, yeah, I'll wait here and we can kind of, check it in details.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Go ahead. Here's the one in the first row.
Hi. I'd be very interested to find out how you deal with app crashes, if you have app crashes. Especially when it comes, if you're using live code updates, and also how you deal with user feedback, because we find it very important about what our users feel about the app and everything. So I'd be very interested in finding out about that.
So the first thing regarding crashes and errors in production, I think that checking and monitoring errors in production is extremely important because there's a limit to how much you can test in the lab. So definitely that's the way to go as much as you can. And React Native makes it a bit more complicated because you have so many domains running side by side. And instead of going into kind of like generalized solutions, I do recommend finding the tools that specialize in each domain. So you can find yourself using more than one tool. Specifically, I would take a crash tool for native. There are very, very good ones out there. We specifically, Twix, use New Relic, but Crashlytics and stuff like that are amazing. So I would definitely use those. For JavaScript, I think it's a specialized domain, and to do monitoring and crashes in JavaScript and to understand what happens takes a lot of skill and a lot of specialization to do asynchronous stack traces and stuff like that, because it's very easy not to understand anything from a crash or a stack trace in JavaScript. And there are several companies and products that do this very well. We use in production Sentry. I think one of the talks showed it yesterday maybe, and that's not bad. Regarding feedback, we actually found that the most successful thing we do is we just added in one of the places in our app a place where people can just click and give feedback directly through the app, and we found that much more successful than just like asking for reviews on the App Store or like the star system. And we have an insane amount of people just like writing a few lines of what they like or don't like, and we just read those. It just comes from the app as emails, and our product managers just go through this and forward to everyone in the teams when they have interesting feedback. So just do something like that. That is what I recommend the most. It's super simple. It's kind of like a contact form that goes directly to you.
May I extend the question a bit? So from what you're saying, I understand that you have separated errors that originate in the native part, the errors that originate in JavaScript, right?
Yes, and I think there's no way around it, because usually you would find that the crashes are very different. I think that a JavaScript crash would never crash your app physically. I mean, the process will be up, but maybe JavaScript will have an uncaught exception. And crashes that are native usually don't result from JavaScript. It was very rare that we had a crash that kind of joined both domains. It might happen, but it's definitely not the common case.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I see that we got one more question on the left side, in the middle.
Thank you. Hi. So this question might be a bit vague, so I'm sorry about it. But anyways, so I actually have a couple of projects in React Native. I have two small projects where it goes like really great because the app is small and everything I do is basically has like a really, let's just say, like a beginning and an end. But I have actually a really huge project and a ticketing app that has a lot of info, a lot of lists, a lot of data. And actually, I find myself struggling a lot with like some performance issues that React still has, mainly on Android. Like on iOS, it works seamlessly. And I guess if I strip down the question is, what advice do you guys have on how to deal with it? So it's like really can be a real headache sometimes.
Performance, I think, is an art. The problem is that you would normally not know where your problems come from, unfortunately, because it's such a complex problem. And we've been dealing with many theoretical issues, for example, the synchronous rendering, but this are usually not the problems that you have. For example, you might have excessive renders, and this is a whole field by itself. And you might have memory issues, which is a whole field by itself, or startup time issues. And I think the next step of evolution is to have more tooling for investigations, because different teams and different apps have problems that are very, very different. And it's very hard to say in advance what they are. So my tip to you is, first of all, not to have premature optimizations and not to assume what you need to fix, even if you read somebody's blog about it that tells you to do something. Because many of the cases, these are not the problems that you have, and you would work hard for 1% optimization of something. So I would spend a lot of time trying to investigate. And investigation is, you don't always need very complex tooling to do. For example, just let's say you have, right now we're struggling with very slow app start on certain devices. Okay, our app has become so huge, our bundle is about 8 megabytes. And our app takes several seconds to start on some Android devices. And just to investigate what's slow there, took us a very long time, and we just did it the old stupid way by putting a lot of console logs of the time in many, many places, and just to figure out what goes on. And I can tell you what we discovered, but I'm not sure that this is the case for you. For example, we discovered that our slow up time, it's basically because two main things. One of them is initialization of the native modules in React Native, this was a framework thing. I think there was a lot of work in that to make this asynchronous. Maybe Eric can say a bit more. And another strange thing that we found is that our requires are taking a huge amount of time. So this is, I mean, I actually want to write a blog post about it because we discovered this is a huge problem. It costs up to 4 seconds in our app. And because requires are always hoisted, and if you use imports, then imports have to be in the beginning of the files. And this results in a system where when you require or import your index, you pretty much require and import everything else. And if your app is big, then you don't need everything else. So my recommendation in that case would be don't do imports. Do requires and require lazily just things as you need them. But this tip, I don't know, I don't think it's valid for all apps. So investigate first.
I guess I'll just spend a quick second reiterating a lot of what Tal said. Yeah, my first instinct was that experimentation on your own app is going to be your best way to get to the bottom of it. You know, try commenting out big sections of the code and see what happens, and really just hack on it until you get a better understanding of what's slowing things down. But the two optimizations that you mentioned are super significant. One of the things is that the React Native core team is working on making it so that the bridge startup is as bare bones as possible, so that the initial wake-up time of the React Native bridge will be a little bit faster. I've heard that they're trying to get it down to just be so small, but I don't have any promises on when that's exactly coming. And the other thing is yeah, trying to require all of your JavaScript at once up front is really bad. And if you can use unbundling, which is this sort of semi-undocumented practice that you can look up some blog posts about, this will help allow your JavaScript thread to only parse the files that you're really requiring, and then you can use thunks behind or use your require statements behind thunks, and you won't load them into JSC until you really need them.
And just like this small obvious stuff for Android, make sure that like you're using the flat list and not list view. But really, it's about finding the bottlenecks and just measuring. So like, try to spend a little bit of time building tools, and tools can be very primitive as well, like console log. Just try to gain understanding first of what is the bottleneck, and then fixing those. In Android, like I think it used to be backed by a recycler view. I don't know if it's like that. Is it still? No? Okay. Okay, he's saying maybe no. Yeah.
Another interesting things about performance I wanna say is that don't worry only about performance, in a blitz that you just try to fix it once. Worry also about performance degradation over time. This is something big that we noticed, that everything was jolly and fast for like the first year. And then after you add a lot of code, then you have small degradations of like 1 and 2% from every major feature that you add, and these pile up over time. And this is a very difficult problem because it's not one thing that you need to fix. And it's very difficult to optimize a feature that causes a degradation of 2%. So we're struggling. Maybe Eric can explain how Facebook deals with it in insane scales. But I can say our plans. For example, what we're thinking to do is to start incorporating performance tests into our end-to-end testing solutions. So instead of just having expectations on what you see on screen, you could have expectations on peak memory usage or number of renders, for example. And if you see a degradation of more than a few percent from your latest commit or the latest version that passed, then at least you would have a failing test or a warning just to know that things are going not in the direction that you want. So watch out for that as well.
I don't know if you want me to continue talking, but yeah, I mean, one of the things that Facebook does is, even though there are hundreds of screens, only the common infrastructure is really loaded up into JSC up front, and then whatever screen is being loaded is what we go ahead and pull out. And we have had infrastructure like you're describing for a long time that we've been using with React Native as of a couple of years now. So,
Thank you.
All right. Got another question.
Hello. I think testing of React Native applications is some issue, while unit testing is quite nice with Jest. The integration tests are a big deal. Could you please say a few words about it?
I have used Calabash, which is basically for iOS apps, and I think it also works for Android. I've been pretty happy with that. It's like you write the end-to-end, I think it's, yeah, end-to-end tests with Ruby, so it's pretty nice, and it worked for us in a customer project that we started building but got canceled. But anyway, I recommend that for like end-to-end.
Yeah, I think unit testing have, as you said, great solutions, and we've moved to Jest, and it's amazing, and we love it. And we have struggled for a very long time with integration or end-to-end testing, automation tests that you run on devices and simulators. And we use tools like Appium, not successfully, I have to say. They're very difficult to use. And we have started an open source initiative to resolve that. And it's general for native apps, but we are tailoring it specifically for React Native. And I think the key here, in my eyes, is to switch from something that is commonly used, which is black box testing, into gray box testing. And gray box testing is a technique, I think, pioneered by Google. They have amazing libraries like Espresso for Android and Earl Grey for iOS. And these libraries are a bit difficult to use for most developers, especially in the React Native space. And one of the projects that we're working on is a project called Detox. You probably heard about it. And what it does, it abstracts all this away and gives you a very nice API in JavaScript to run end-to-end tests in simulators. And some of our projects are running this on Travis on every build, and it's working beautifully. It's right now in production for iOS, and very, very soon an Android version will be released. And we have some very avid community contributors working with us on this project. One of them is sitting right here in the front row. And he's not a Wix employee, and he's devoting a lot of his energy and Detox, and this is super exciting to me to see that. Because to have external contributors, if you're not Facebook size, is, I don't know, emotional.
Yeah, just to follow up on this, if you would like to see Appium getting like how does it run, it's extremely difficult. But someone set it up for React Native tests like a year ago. I don't know who that was, but it was a god. It works. You can check it, but it's gonna be replaced by Detox soon anyway. So.
Hey, I had a question. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for React Native. I tell everybody to use it because it's the best way to create native mobile apps. But then sometimes I stay up at night and I think, do we really want to be creating native mobile apps? Like, you know, what about the web? Like, what the problem we're trying to solve is mobility, not the specific technology. So where do you see like progressive web apps and mobile web? Will it catch up? Will, you know, like at some point, will we go back to that distribution mechanism?
Yeah, where is Kat?
To comment on that.
I think my opinion is a bit polemic, but I think the web is dead. Seriously. In the sense that there's so many stuff that are broken. Just IPv4 start, but that's the internet. But I think what it basically boils down to, and especially when I'm thinking of from the perspective of someone who's building like this sort of decentralized social network, you just need all of the APIs that the device can give you, like UDP and all of the stuff. And I feel like if I'm going to build software and I can't have access to those things, you know, then I can't build software as good as all of the other software that is not a browser, you know. But yeah, I mean, let's make this a discussion.
I mean, it's really tough to sort of address these problems when we don't have any control over these web browsers on mobile, right? It's Apple or Google who's going to fix it and provide sort of lower level ways to squeeze the extra performance and get access to all the device APIs, and I hope they do it.
Just a quick comment. The great thing about the web is that you have like, you know, distribution in a sort of like non-hierarchical way. That's the great part. And that's the part that I think we should keep. And I think like Google and Apple are making that harder. And that's really sad. And that's the part of the web that we should really hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be what will kind of decide what goes on is business decisions made by Google and Apple, and we have to be pragmatic and understand that mobile is kind of governed by who creates the popular operating systems, and it is indeed not our choice. And I think if you look from a business perspective, I don't think Google and Apple have very much incentive of combining the development efforts. I think they want to pull them further apart. They want to pull the operating systems apart because they want to, I don't want to say lock in, but they want to give every user kind of a specialized, unique experience in this operating system that will keep them within this operating system. And I know that iOS users are very passionate about iOS, and Android users are very passionate about Android. And I rarely see people who kind of switch. You kind of love one operating system. It kind of fits your philosophy. And I think that's just the way the world works. And this translates to engineering because, you know, the web is kind of like the lowest common denominator. And I think there are business incentives to keep these lowest common denominator low. And if you want to squeeze the most out of the platforms, and the platforms are diverging, not converging, and this will kind of make us use native APIs to make the most out of what they have to offer, unfortunately. But that's the way it is.
I mean, I think this is one of the React Native is extremely exciting to me because it allows us to have open source. We've got the web. We're all in the same room together, and we're able to deliver iOS and Android apps. Like, this is extremely exciting that we have React Native to sort of help keep the world a little bit more free in this way.
I just wanted to add that people also talk about different things when they say apps. For some people, a web app can mean something that's essentially just a website. And I don't think there's a point in downloading hundreds of megabytes of data to use a website like a web store where I buy something once and never use it again. But what we're doing with React Native and what we're doing on native mobile apps are very different beasts than what 99% of web apps are. So I feel like it's also, so in a way, it's a false dichotomy between web apps and native apps because they often are used for very different purposes.
One more thing I want to add is the way I hope the future is moving forward is towards maybe instant apps. And instant apps are maybe native apps that you can just run instantly and not install them. And they would be much, much smaller. And I know that Google is working with Android instant apps. I personally don't believe in that direction, but I do think that React Native kind of gives exciting possibilities in this regard. And I know that Ken Wheeler in Chain React presented something very cool, which is maybe if mobile browsers would execute React Native bundles. This could be kind of a way to use kind of a concept which is similar to Flash, where you can have apps running in the browser, and maybe this technology could be React Native because you can bring a bundle which is just JavaScript. You can download it over there and execute it, and you would have the native experience, and it would be immediate without installation. And you can even have it sandboxed and secure, and this is very exciting to me personally.
May I ask the question regarding IP, but maybe a bit different IP? Because here I observe for 2 days that there is a great community only in this room, but there is also around the globe 100 or 1,000 developers touching this technology, React Native, and having an opportunity that we have people from Facebook. May I ask the important question, which is holding a lot of developers to touch the React Native and React technology, which is the license. Can you please explain?
Did the lights just get really hot in here? Or is it? Yeah, it is
like,
just me.
Like I can't literally say who's asking the question because of the light. I'm like trying to see.
Unfortunately, it's not something I can really discuss, but I think there was a blog post recently that Christopher Chateau posted, Viju. It provides a little bit more light on it, and
yeah, there's been an article by James Ida as well, just like yesterday on Medium about the license. I haven't read it like entirely because of the conference, but all I can tell you, like he explained the history behind it, and basically he said that it's like as long as you are not going to sue Facebook, you're all right. But I'm not a lawyer, which is kind of.
Excuse me, just a question: is this explanation about the patent trolls? I mean, every big company like Google or Twitter or IBM have its patent trolls, and for example, Twitter have done a very good contribution to open source, releasing the Bootstrap, giving it away to Apache. Also IBM. I mean, these guys also have this kind of problems, and I think the explanation is kind of weak.
I'm sorry, I can't defend it right now. That like it's something we talk about a lot internally for what it's worth, but I really have nothing to say on the subject. I'm sorry.
Like this is not a topic for like developers, but you know it's a topic for business people and lawyers. But that said, I find it very hard to swallow the argument of victimization of Facebook, because all of these other big companies also get patent trolls, and Facebook pays just 4% taxes, which is super low. So I don't think they're like really gonna lose money.
All I'll add is, as a developer, from a developer perspective, is maybe take a little comfort that you see large companies kind of joining in and joining the React community. And I can see that in companies like Uber and Airbnb and Microsoft. And I hope that if their huge legal departments kind of figured out that it's okay, it might be okay just for the small guys like us.
All right. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I can see there is one here, and one here. So since we, yeah, okay, go ahead.
So we've had 3 of you all actually on our podcast before, so it's good to see you in person. But my question is about navigation. I work with a lot of companies that are building new apps, and they kind of are starting up from scratch, and a lot of times I'm consulting them on kind of which navigation library to use. I know that Wix has a really nice navigation library, and I've actually been kind of, especially lately, kind of leaning more towards that. But there's also React Navigation, which seems pretty nice, and I really like the API a lot, and a lot of people really like that API a lot as well. I guess my main question is, what would you recommend using on a new project at this point? And maybe what do you see the future of React Native navigation being, and how can we as a community help to kind of contribute and move everything forward?
So I'm really excited about the opportunities that we have here to sort of iterate and look at the field of opportunities. For example, React Navigation is this big monolith library, right? But it's got all sorts of different constituent components. And it'd be really great if we could decouple them and make it so that they're a little bit easier to maintain, and such that someone who's new could at least have a variety of sort of stable options between them. But at the same time, I'm not quite in this position, and I'd really sort of like to see the community work together to iterate forward. And I'm extremely excited by Expo's continued work on React Navigation, as well as the variety of options that we have available, including Wix.
This is a topic I'm very passionate about, and I think we need to split up the conversation between 2 parts. And one part is the API that developers use for navigation. And this is one question. And the second question is, what is the low-level implementation of this navigation? So regarding API, I think here we are we need to be open. I mean, different developers like different styles. Some developers want to have everything declarative. Some are more comfortable with things that are a bit more imperative. And it's all okay. And we can do these abstractions. And we can have API surfaces that are like Wix navigation or React navigation. But it doesn't matter. I mean, if we can have some sort of way that the underneath would be, you could pick and choose which implementation you want and choose the API that you like, maybe that's the way we should move forward towards. Regarding implementation, I have a more vocal opinion. I personally deeply believe that the low-level implementation of navigation has to be native. And the reasoning for that is because I personally don't believe in faking views in JavaScript, because operating systems updates. We have iOS 11 coming out soon, and the navigation will change slightly because Apple changed it. And only native navigation solutions underneath will give you this experience, you know, for the users who upgraded versus the users who didn't. And there are also performance implications. For small apps, it doesn't really matter, but as your app grows, then you need the life cycle that the native view controllers or fragments or activities provide. And I think this is something that is a necessity. It is not something optional, and we must rely on it. I really hope that the low-level implementation eventually will be something like Wix's React Native navigation, but we do need help. This is a monumental project. We've been working on it a lot, and it's not soon to be finished. We're working on version 2, and I think the main achievement that we've had so far is the ability to make version 2 tested. And we've had developers that have never touched the project, and the project is 100% tested now, both unit tests and end-to-end tests. And if you want to add a feature, you can do that and know if you broke something. And I think that's amazing. So I urge any of you, who, even non-native developers, you know, like learn a little bit native code and try to contribute a feature, and you will be amazed that you can know if it's working or not, and help us do that. And I urge all the other people who like APIs, then to wrap those libraries and give the API flavors that you like. Maybe do kind of a combination between React Navigation that uses the Wix React Native Navigation underneath. That would be amazing as well.
All right, since we were planning 45 minutes for a Q&A, and I've already seen like 2 hands here, let's just let you guys ask your questions and we'll be wrapping up.
Right, there was earlier in the discussion about the web maybe being dead, and I have a question related to that. I'm very much interested in sharing code between React Native and React on the web, and even though those are like similar, like it's a same pattern, there's a lot of differences which are not very meaningful, like things that are different, but they're not fundamental to web being different from iOS and Android, right? I'm much more interested in seeing things that are like different only where it's meaningful. How on iOS and Android you can share pretty much all of it. Just small things are different. And the same thing on the web. And there's a bunch of things like React Native Web and React XP and a couple of other things. And I wanted to ask your opinion about those projects. And there isn't like one standard maybe. And what's the path forward here?
I think a lot of us are excited about React primitives. I've been talking to people about this for a while. I'm a big fan of Leland's approach, where React primitives is a very lightweight sort of base library. And as someone who's experimented a little bit with using, trying to share code between web and native, the most painful thing that I've experienced is that the packagers are different and that there's all sorts of different rules and behaviors about the different packagers. So I think that we're going to need to wait for both Metro and or Webpack to evolve, and for us to sort of find some medium where we can use one packager for all of our use cases, and then we'll be a little bit more unblocked to actually adopt React primitives or something similar like React Native Web.
I want to share a bit about our experience with it, and I think many will agree that this is what you're facing, because the web has existed for so much longer, and the amount of legacy that we have in our projects regarding the web is already there. And usually the new mobile projects, especially with React Native, because it's so new, they're starting now from scratch. And it's hard to ignore that you already have a huge amount of legacy in the web. So this is not an option for us, to be honest. We can't really share the code because the web is mostly written already, and some of it is in different technologies like Angular. I mean, that's what we used before Wix switched to React. And we're not going to rewrite everything. I mean, we have to be realistic about it. I can share an approach that we've been using, and we found it somewhat successful, and it's not the pink world of, sharing everything. But we have been taking business logic and in vanilla JavaScript and sharing it as NPM libraries between projects. And this works kind of well. And this may be a way forward, even if you have a lot of things already set up and you don't need to share all the tooling like the packagers that Eric mentioned.
All right. Okay. I think I saw someone else that wanted to ask a question. Still interested or not? Okay. Yeah, I also... Oh, so do we have it or not? Okay. Go ahead.
Here. Thanks. So I'm really excited about projects such as Expo. And I've been wondering if you guys at Facebook have been considering allowing the possibility of running React Native apps or like JS bundles in Facebook or Messenger, as we've seen, for instance, allowing the possibility of running games within Facebook, for instance. And if it's even like realistic to do.
As far as third-party applications, you mean?
Yes.
It's something that a couple of us at Facebook have thought about, but one of the big concerns there is security. We're very blocked by the fact that we cannot just run arbitrary third-party. You trust me, you don't want me to allow you to run third-party code inside of your apps because that's very dangerous, and you don't want people crawling around and making queries on your behalf and whatnot. So. I mean, maybe in the distant future, I think that would be pretty cool, but yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you guys very much for taking part. Thank you for questions.